We're in the heart of severe storm season as we end the month of April and go into May, which is typically the most active time frame of the season. And we've already experienced an active year so far. We've had 670 confirmed tornadoes so far this season, and we still have the busiest time frame ahead. And we've got more active days ahead as well. So it's all compliments of this low-level jet, this really dip in the jet stream that's just been hanging out into the desert southwest, been sending out these pulses of energy out ahead of it, combined with the dry line out in West Texas and a cool front. And it's that boundary along with a warm front today through Ohio, Pennsylvania, and all the way up into New York, where they could actually see some severe storms later on this afternoon. The breakdown, the latest update from the Storm Prediction Center does in fact have that upgraded enhanced risk for those areas across West Texas. That area has been inundated lately. It actually produced some 4 and 5 inch stones just in the last 7 days out there. And we could be seeing some of that massive hail today. A lot of dynamics are definitely in place as the dry line gets active. Later on this afternoon, these supercell thunderstorms will likely blow up, and these cloud tops are going to be over 50,000 feet up in the atmosphere, producing some of those pretty intense hailstones out there. And that is going to be lifting northeast through Oklahoma and then eventually head up into portions of Ohio, where they actually have their own severe storm risk as the warm front will be shifting from west to east across Indiana, Ohio, as well as into Pennsylvania. Yes, you do in fact have an elevated tornado risk where that dry line setup is and where that warm front is going to be screaming across, and a flood threat. And because of more or less that stalled frontal boundary, it's just been going to get a conveyor belt of moisture. So we've had flood watches in place for most of Oklahoma and portions of across the Red River. We do in fact have that upgraded moderate risk for excessive rainfall, yet another 2 to 4 inch possibilities of very intense rain. Those areas in yellow likely about 1 to 3 inches today, and once you get up in the green, a little bit lighter amounts towards maybe an inch as we move towards Kentucky, back into Ohio, into western Pennsylvania. But the more concerning aspect today is going to be the large hail that could produce. Look at some of these latest helicity, these updraft parameters, kind of hinting at these numerous supercells are going to kind of congeal together and produce some of these isolated supercell thunderstorms that produce some of those big time hail producers and even tornadic producers as well. With those helicity tracks are pretty compacted there into West Texas, Northwest Texas, those places like Childress, Wichita Falls region. You get into the, say Oklahoma City region southbound, likely starts to light up later on tonight across southeast portions of Oklahoma, and then this gets along that frontal boundary into Missouri, southern Illinois, and eventually this will race up Ohio, back into Pennsylvania and upstate New York. If you look at the latest infrared satellite picture, you can see that it kind of blows up this afternoon. These cloud tops are going to be soaring to 50,000 feet, if not maybe more in some isolated areas. Those are going to be supercell thunderstorms are going to be screaming across as they lift northeast and could produce some tornadoes along the way and a lot of heavy rainfall. This is just your precipitation over the next 24 hours. And this is the training aspect. This is why we have the flood watches in place and the elevated excessive, slight, and moderate risk in place, because of these slow moving supercells. Once they get going, they'll likely start off in a more of an isolated, discrete wind, hail and tornado threat, transfer to more of a wind threat, and then eventually end up more or less just a heavy rain threat and training heavy rains and then flooding rains as well. Flash flooding is definitely a huge concern, especially up here into Oklahoma, where they've had just inundated areas like into Lawton. A lot of flash flooding as of lately, and so this is going to be adding to those saturated soils, and then lighter amounts once you swing up into Kentucky as well as into Ohio, back into western PA. But it all still goes tomorrow because the parent low will finally actually be on the move. The cool front will be on the move, and the dry line will actually be on the move, and that shifts the severe weather threat a little bit further south and southeast. So now the bullseye would likely be the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and those areas points just to the northeast there, as that cool front's going to take its sweet time sagging southbound, and it likely won't get going until tomorrow afternoon into tomorrow night. But a lot of parameters are really starting to come together. We'll be looking at possible an upgraded risk to at least to an enhanced risk for most of North Texas there, as a lot of the parameters are really starting to come together and look at a little bit more of a significant threat tomorrow, especially the updated tornado parameter index, kind of already hinting on almost off the chart that only goes to 10, and we're looking at maybe 13. So a lot of dynamics are starting to come together. This looks to be after, say, 3 o'clock. I think the more prime time areas are going to be 5 to say 10 o'clock tomorrow night from North Texas, and then a little shifting into portions of Central Texas. That's the zone where I'm definitely expecting an upgraded, elevated, enhanced risk, and a 10% hatched risk when the Storm Prediction Center does in fact upgrade this afternoon. So looking at the rain aspect too, with that front moving, just shifting a little bit, it doesn't take much. That puts the axis of the heavy rain a little bit further south. So now that does include that 1 to 3 inch area for North Texas and portions of Central Texas, but still the heavier rains still get going into more eastern portions of Oklahoma this time, heading into Arkansas, where they definitely don't need any rain out there, Missouri. So the same places typically, still continue to seem to get inundated and hit over and over and over again with more heavy rain, and definitely concerning as we kind of zoom into the Dallas-Fort Worth area, look at some of the high resolution guidances. It definitely looks nasty tomorrow night. This is a time frame, kind of a snapshot of future radar about 9 o'clock there. And look at that, folks. That is definitely concerning. These little white little bubbles here, these renegade supercells, every one of these could be some large hail producers, and possible having rotation, because we're going to have a low level cloud deck in place. Surface based storms could get going, and it's not going to take much to rotate that atmosphere. So we have a window there after 3, likely between 5 and 10 there. We definitely got to be concerned. Probably a tornado watch in place by then. And we are expecting, at least I'm expecting, an upgraded enhanced risk across that region. And one of the transitions we've seen is almost more of a, we highlighted that transition out of La Nina going into Enzo neutral, more neutral type phase, but we did have a little bit of a warm up there into the Equatorial Pacific, especially off the Peru coast there, that had a spike in those temperatures, or at least for a week or two. So I think we're seeing some of the downward projections of that, and that elevated subtropical jet stream really getting going right at peak season here. And that all combines with the more active time frame that we're likely seeing even in the weeks ahead, and flash flooding is likely going to be more of a huge concern even heading into next week. As things start to get more saturated, it's not going to take much to produce more widespread flash flood watches, and this would likely extend further south into Texas by then. But by Thursday, now that we moved that area out of the Dallas-Fort Worth area, shifted just a little bit further south, the dynamics aren't as strong as they were basically in Wednesday, but we still have a concern for some of those turning severe in the heat of the afternoon. Likely southeast Texas, shifting into Louisiana by then, Mississippi, those areas in Tennessee, Kentucky, and back into Ohio again, with more of kind of the culprit of that cool front, and that just kind of backs up on Friday as a warm front. So it's right along that boundary again. We could be looking at possible more isolated, scattered to severe storms within the Dallas-Fort Worth region, within those areas of Louisiana, southern Oklahoma, getting into Arkansas again. Right along that boundary, will likely have a risk in place from the Storm Prediction Center going into that Friday time frame, but even extending into next week, going into that first week of May. It doesn't stop there, right? The May is typically the wettest month of the year, And that's exactly what's likely going to unfold, because the upward rising motion air is going to be in full throttle as we head into next week. And the Climate Prediction Center is already highlighting a moderate risk for excessive rainfall heading into that May 6th, May 7th timeframe. I think most of these areas will be saturated by then in Texas, and that will be looking at flood watches by then. And this is going to be a concerning flood threat with that heavy rain pushing back into Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, a good part of the southern plains as we start the month of May, more on the active side as well. And if you look at some of the ensemble guidance, already kind of hinting at it as well. So we tend to dry out a little bit across the Ohio Valley, the Tennessee Valley, those areas. And then again, the bullseye likely is going to be across the southern and central plains with just this conveyor belt of moisture streaming in from the south. We've got a lot of upward motion air, the subtropical jets basically on full throttle, combined with the climatologically the wettest time of the year. And it's going to play out just like that, with more rounds of just heavy rain that likely will unfold. And we'll be talking about numerous flash flood watches, especially as we head towards the end of next week. So guys, I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video, definitely hit the subscribe button, and catch me next update. Wire protect you before and after the storm.